Whakataka te hao ki te uru, whakataka te hao ki te tonga. Kia makinakina ki uta, kia mataratara ki tai, ihi aki ana te atakura ki teo, hi huka, hi hauhanga, haumi e, hui e, taiki e. It's just a really nice way of stopping and preparing ourselves for what is to come. So I've got a presentation for you today, and I'm hoping that the information here is really relevant to the environment that we find ourselves in, and that you get some practical tips to take away and to use. So this is what I'm hoping you'll get out of today, understanding what mental health and wellbeing is and why it's important to think about it at work, how we create a positive work environment, and some practical things that you can do. And we've had a few questions that people have submitted before today, so I'm hoping to be able to answer those for you as well. So what is mental health and wellbeing? The World Health Organization has got some things to say about this, and ultimately it's not just the absence of disease, and it's really important to know that health is not just the absence of disease. So it's a state of well-being where everybody can reach their potential. They can cope with the normal stresses of daily life and can work productively and fruitfully, and also contribute to their community. But we often talk about well-being, and in the workplace, it's often seen as a soft thing. People talking about well-being, or they're going on about well-being again. They mean fruit on Fridays and yoga on Mondays and Wednesdays. But that's not what we mean at all. And when we're talking about risks in the workplace, what we talk about in terms of wellbeing is psychosocial risk. And often it's useful to think about it in terms of mental wellbeing. But in the workplace, if we're talking about risk, we talk about psychosocial risk. And what is the aspect of work that harms or impairs our mental wellbeing? So why do we care? Poor mental wellbeing is costly to both individuals and organisations. Can be acute, so something might happen, there might be a trauma in the workplace that impacts our well-being, or it might be slow and insidious. It might be bullying, it might be harassment, it might be the hours that we work, the culture that says that working long hours is a badge of honour. It might be other aspects of our work, it might be too repetitive, it might be too much control or too little control. It could be all sorts of things impacting on that and making it chronic. So single or repeated exposure. The impact can be mild or severe. So we may be stressed, we may be tired, and we may not have enough control. And if these things go on and on over an extended period of time, then chances are that we may end up with depression or anxiety. So it's important to identify what those risks are and manage them. So mental wellbeing, often in the workplace, we've talked about building resilience, and the expectation has been on the individual person to do all the mahi. But in actual fact, we know that an awful lot of things impact our mental health and well-being, whether it be a spiritual well-being, the environment we're in, and if the environment we're in is considered toxic, or your experience of it is toxic, then it will have an impact on us. Our historical context, where we come from, what we know, what our biases are, our culture, what we see is our view of the world and how that impacts how we view our work. Our relationships, who we get on with work and who we don't, who we get on with outside work and who we don't, and our economic and political systems, how much we value our people and how much our economic and political systems support people, and of course our physical health, which we have some control over in terms of nutrition and exercise and diet and sleep and stuff like that, but we don't have total control over it, obviously. So what do we want for our workers? Ultimately, we want our workers to feel good. So we want them to have good feelings and life satisfaction. And we know that that's not going to happen all the time. But in terms of the definition, it's kind of most of the time. We want the people to function well. So we want them to do things that provide meaning and purpose. And that meaning and purpose is really important in terms of engagement in the workplace. If people don't feel like the work that they're doing is meaningful or with purpose, then they're much more likely to be disconnected from the workplace. And that's going to have a negative impact on their well-being. And it's really important that people feel connected. And that's so important now in the environment that we're in with COVID. How do we encourage that? And we'll talk a little bit about that some more a bit further down the track. So that sense of belonging and feeling valued is incredibly important. And really important with so many people working from home in hybrid situations, with some people in the office and some people working from home. How do we manage that? The statistics are not good for New Zealand. So the estimates are it's 1.65 billion per annum is the cost of mental health problems to New Zealand business. And just recently, last year, we can see that this particular research found that in the last 12 months, of the research would have been in 2019, 20% of respondents experienced depression. Sorry, I can't actually see that. I'll just have to move my picture of me. Yeah. 20% of respondents experienced depression, 31% anxiety, and 60% stress. Those numbers are nothing to be proud of in the workplace. And in terms of the workplace barometer, 2020, 70% of respondents reported an absence of work during the previous 12 months due to physical or mental health. So what we know about people, oops, sorry, I wasn't meant to do that. What we know about people who are generally unhappy is these are the things that they're not doing in their life. Generally, they have poor work-life balance. Generally, they spend less time outside. They're not getting the exercise and they're not considering getting the exercise. They're less likely to keep their brain stimulated. And they've indicated they've had quite a lot of stress in the last month. They're not getting enough sleep and they're not prioritising it. And they're less likely to seek medical attention. They are more likely to consider nurturing and maintaining relationships and spending time with family. But these are things they're not already doing. So that's starting to give us a picture of some of the things that we might be able to do as individuals. And these are the things that cause people stress. And so this is from the Southern Cross survey last year. And so we can see that money and worrying about our children and what they're going to cope with are the two top ones. But you've got lots. You've got those 7 right at the top there that are all significantly important to people. And the idea about climate change and our planet's future is definitely up there now, as well as global events. Why should a business care about wellbeing at work or psychosocial risk? Because if we get it right, then we're going to improve our recruitment and our retention. We're going to be a great place to work and people are going to want to work there. It means that you have fewer disruptions impacting your organisations, have a better reputation, decreased unplanned leave. So that's your sick leave. So when people are stressed long term, they're much more likely to go off sick. They're much more likely to get sick. Coughs and colds, stomach disorders, headaches, all sorts of other things are due to stress and anxiety in the workplace. Decreased presenteeism. So presenteeism is when people still come to work, but actually they're out to lunch. They really can't concentrate and they can't focus, but they're there. And we know that if we get this right, we have increased productivity, which improves our customer service. So if we look after our people will look after the mahi. We can have all the knowledge, skills and experience in the world, but if we don't have the energy to actually use the knowledge, skills and experience that we have, then it's of little value. And of course, we have a whole bunch of legislation that is telling us that we need to do what's right for our people. So in terms of the work environment, what are we trying to achieve? We want the workplace to be safe, so psychologically healthy environment. We want it to be supportive. Supportive also means fair and empathetic. And we want it to be strong. So we want it to have a real focus on mental health and wellbeing and building, reducing risk and building resilience in the workplace. So what are the elements? So how do we do this? So these are the 4 things that I'm going to talk about now in terms of giving you some tips to manage this area in the workplace. The first thing that's most important is leadership commitment. Leadership really has a very big impact on our culture, and then our culture impacts our leaders, and both of those things impact performance. So if we have a leadership that through its own behaviours makes it look like that working really long hours is a badge of honour, then it's going to be very, very difficult for anybody under the management team to say, no, this is too much, I just need to reduce my work hours, because it becomes a badge of honour. And then you get that culture where everybody stays late and works unreasonable hours. So leadership commitment is super important. Policies and processes, so they need to be there obviously to support the people in the mahi. Effective communication and evaluating and reviewing. So let's look at those a little bit more in a bit more detail. So when we talk about leadership commitment, we need leaders who communicate policy and objectives that are around psychosocial risk and wellbeing. So unless they actually buy into it at that level, then it's going to be very difficult to do things at a systemic level, because they won't be interested in managing the risk. And so it's very important that our leadership's demonstrated commitment to policies and objectives in this area, and then they communicate that commitment. So they have to model mentally healthy values and behaviours. What does it look like in terms of, if we want to have lower psychosocial risk, then what does that mean in terms of the behaviours that we need to be modelled by these people? And of course, we need them to engage with the team. So in terms of policies and processes, these need to support the people of work to do their work. Shouldn't be the other way around. It shouldn't be people trying to fit into policies. I was in a work environment quite recently, and there were two separate groups. One was health, one was safety. And the one group was saying these systems aren't working for us, and the other group was saying, but we spent so long agreeing them, they should work. So, but they don't. So it's really important that we keep that dialogue open, and that when something no longer seems to be fit for purpose, that we can come back around the table and make sure that the systems and processes are fit for purpose. It's important to ask questions of each policy that we have, and you'll be from a variety of organisations across all sorts of different industries. And if you're looking at a particular policy, any policy, asking, is it safe? Is this helping to create a psychologically safe workplace? Is it proactive? Is it fair and empathetic? Or is it the opposite of those things? And does it strengthen our wellbeing? And is it encouraging our workers to engage? You know, engagement is a really important part of the health and safety at work legislation, and it's one of the pillars, participation and engagement. So to improve our wellbeing and reduce our psychosocial risk at work, that engagement and participation is incredibly important. Other questions to ask regarding policy and processes: do they reflect our workplace values? Do you know what your workplace values are? Or are they just certificates or posters on the wall? Do people actually know what they are and really do the mahi in accordance with them? How are risks to mental wellbeing identified and managed? Is there a process for saying there's too much work, or this kind of work should be done by somebody else, or have you got a bullying and harassment policy? All those things. How are those things identified and managed? And I guess the most important thing is, if we've got people at the centre of everything we're doing, then we're treating people as a strategic asset. So they have the knowledge and they're contributing to the purpose and values of the organisation. So I like to think of people as an asset, not as a resource, because we look after our assets. And in terms of resources, generally they're something that we use up and spit out. And so we don't want to think about people in that way, I don't think. So I like to think about them as strategic assets. I just popped in some tools here for you, some extra tools. We can come back and give these to you later. But in terms of tools around managing psychosocial risk, the Business Leaders Health and Safety Forum has put out some resources, which you can just jump on to their website and find. Literally put in Business Leaders Health and Safety Forum and then go to the resource tab and you'll find them. And of course, ISO 45003 was launched this July, and that's an occupational health and safety tool for managing psychological health and safety at work. That's a guideline. And so I like to use the two of them. I think one is a really great standard and the other one is a really great resource. So I encourage you to look those up too. So the third part is effective communication. So really important again at the moment in the environment that we're in, ensure that messages are relevant and transparent and that they're clear and consistent. So often at the moment, if you listen to the news, you'll be left confused. So it's really important to make sure our messaging is really clear in the workplace. Messages should strike a balance. So it's not about having an information dump. It's about making sure people know what they need to know in order to do the work that is required of them. So just think about that. Don't just dump on people all of the time. Think about what it is they need to know and when they need to know it, so that it can assist them in the work that they need to do. And of course, on a recent contract I was on, it was interesting. Lots of people said we want less information. So it was a project around COVID. We want less information, and we want it to be provided in different ways. We want it in graphs and we want it in tables. We want to know what we have to do and what we have to stop doing. And other people said, I just want it in bullet form. And other people said, oh, actually, we're finding the language really difficult. So you have to think about the workers that you have and use a variety of mediums, because not everybody's going to want to use the same one. The other thing with team communication is that we've got to think about when we're face-to-face with people, either online or not online, how do we deal with that? So team discussions, one-on-one, and conversations when someone's struggling. So we're going to start with team discussions. The team, manufacturing team. It's really important, and this is one of the questions I had, was around knowing your team members. You know, for Aucklanders, we've been in lockdown now for 3 months essentially. And during that time, people have left organisations and people have started organisations. And some organisations have actually been set up and are starting to run out of Wellington. So how do you get to know your team members? How do you get to know what their strengths and weaknesses are as individuals and as teams? It's really important to engage with them, to say, how are we going to do this? Some people will want to do it online, some people want to do it via email, you know, use a variety of ways, and think about what is it you need to know about people and how people can contribute to their work. If workers are working in a hybrid situation or working from home, then the routine check-ins and debriefs are really important. And I would really encourage team leaders and managers to be checking in with their team every day. That's probably a big ask, but you could do it as a team meeting, and then if you're worried about someone or if you've got something specific, you can take it offline and talk with that individual person. And wellbeing conversations should be part of a normal check-in in a team anyway. So regardless of the COVID experience, the understanding people well enough to know when things are going well for them and being able to check in and talk about it, and when things aren't going so well for them and being able to check in and talk about them. They should just be part of normal conversation in teams, and a normal part of conversation in team meetings. How's it going? What's working well? It's really important at the moment to ensure that expectations of our team and ourselves are reasonable, particularly for people who are working from home and are juggling multiple roles: role of mother, role of wife, role of teacher, role of worker, whatever other roles they have as well. There's people, I've been working with people who are working full-time in the workplace, and then they're going home and there's no respite, because they get home and they have to pick up the schoolwork for their children and make sure that the children have been doing the things they're supposed to do during the day. So it's really important to ensure that our expectations of our teams and ourselves are reasonable. This is not a sprint, it's a marathon. It's really important to create a sense of control, hope and fun for people. You know, if people are feeling that things are spinning a bit out of control, then focusing on what are the things that you can control as opposed to what are the things you can't control, and really trying to establish a sense of hope and fun. It's not going to be this way forever, and it will get better. And what is it that you're looking forward to most, and when are you going to do it? And get some stuff in the diary for, we think in December that we might be allowed to see each other, so let's have a physically distant picnic in a park somewhere together as a team, or whether it's if we're allowed to have a game of something by then or whatever. But try and create things that are relevant to your teams that can bring you together and have a sense of hope and fun. It's really, really important. And that's part of team building too, but thinking about how you need to build your team. What's worked before and what are you willing to try now, because we're in a different environment. And again, checking in with your team and saying, let's do this, let's have a go at that and see if we can build a team, and make sure that anybody who's new is really supported in that process, and that you really spend time to make sure that they're going to want to hang around. One-on-one. We're missing out on that too at the moment, aren't we? So it's really important with one-on-one conversations that we practice them every day. It sounds silly, doesn't it? But how are you today? What's important to you today? What supports are in place that are going to help you do the mahi today, and what's getting in the way for you? If we have those conversations every day, or just what did you get up to the weekend? How's the family? Or if you know someone a little bit better, you can ask more personal questions. But if we get really great at having everyday conversations, when someone is struggling, then we're going to find it much easier to talk about it. So really important to practice. Of course, then there's the COVID conversation. And we can't talk today without touching on COVID. So I just want to share a little bit with you about the COVID conversation. It's really important at the moment because we have differing views from people in our friend group and people in our family. And it's really important to be aware and manage our own emotions. So if we're going to talk about COVID and going to talk about our views on that. So really important to keep a lid on our emotions and think about the tone of our voice and make sure that we're really listening with our bodies. Think about the speed of our voice, how loud it is, and what body language that we're using, and be very focused on that so that we're not heightening a response from somebody else. Also really, really important is to be non-judgmental. I can say, you know, in the family that I'm in, that we have people who are medically unable to have the vaccine, and we have others that have chosen not to at this point. And it's really important to be non-judgmental about that. Ask questions, don't make assumptions. We don't know, if we see someone wearing a mask, we don't know whether they're just choosing to not wear a mask because they don't like the rules, or in actual fact, if there's another reason. So don't make assumptions and don't judge based on what you've seen, because you don't know. Listen, try and understand, empathize and use affirmation. So, you know, I've got used to wearing a mask now, but at the beginning, I didn't like wearing them. They were uncomfortable and they were hot. And I've had to change the kind of mask I wear because the one I've got is 3 layers thick and it's actually just plain too hot now. So I've gone back to the throwaway ones. So I hear that mask wearing is really uncomfortable for you. I've tried to use a different mask. Do you want to use one of my disposable ones, not used, and have a go and see if that's any better? So we're actually saying, yes, I hear you, rather than being dismissive. And that's really important, because I was listening to a sociologist yesterday talking about what's happening in our communities. And one of the things he said was that the anti-vax community is going to up the ante because they feel like they're not being heard. And so at an individual level too, we want to give people the opportunity to be heard. It's really important to distinguish between vaccine hesitancy and anti-vax. So for the vaccine hesitant, it's about really understanding, you know, what are you worried about? And then maybe helping them answer those questions, ticking them off one at a time. For the anti-vaxxer, you know, they've got a very fixed position, and chances are you're not going to make an impression at all. So, and if it's all getting really too hard, if you've got someone in the family or in the friend group that is an anti-vaxxer, just focus on what you can agree on and move on. The other situation, of course, is, and I've had a few questions about this, so people turning up to have a drink with somebody, assuming that they will have the same view to public health measures as themselves, and only arriving to discover that they don't. So it's important, again, to keep yourself safe and feel safe. So it's about when you do or don't do. When you don't wear a mask and when you don't keep your distance, it makes me feel unsafe. To feel safe, I need to be 2 meters away from you, or with a mask on, be 1 meter away from you. So just getting used to having some of that without emotion, and again, managing your tone and your speed and how loud you are and your body language. People won't want other people to feel unsafe. They just don't necessarily think about it in that light. What about conversations when someone might be struggling? And chances are there are more people struggling out there at the moment because of lockdowns and because of uncertainty. So what might you notice? So the most important thing is to know our people really, really well, so that you can notice if anything's changing. So we might have changes in behaviour, we might have changes in emotions, we might have changes in the way people think and reactions. So some of those things might look like, we might see people arriving late at work, we might see them arriving earlier at work, or staying, or missing breaks, or being more critical, or holding on to work and not letting it go, or crying, or just getting stuck on an issue and not being able to move on. But if you know someone really well, what you're focusing on is that you've noticed a change. So think about what changes. And the thing is to ask and listen. How are you? I've noticed that this has changed. And then listen. It's really important to listen and help. So we don't expect people to fix other people. The help might simply be, I'm here to listen. The help might be, what can I do to help you in this situation? And checking in with people again. So some tips, if you're going to have a conversation with someone, think about the time and the place. Don't do it at the end of the day when people are tired and fractious. Think about going somewhere quiet and private. Talk about the behaviour or the change. So always focus on the thing that's changed. Don't label people. It's very unhelpful. Reassure and be non-judgmental. So you're there to listen. Ask questions. Don't make assumptions. So if you're asking questions, say what and how. Don't use why. Why usually puts people on the defensive. So asking questions using what and how. And just listening. And, you know, if I don't know if there's lots of health professionals online or not. Health professional, and I am a health professional. We're used to being in a telling situation. So it's really important to do this and to ask questions and not make assumptions. And to empathise, help to make a plan about what to do next. That's really important, and check back later. And if you're worried about someone, then look at what you need to do next with that person. So if they tell you stuff that makes you concerned, then you say, I'd like to make an arrangement for you to see the GP, or contact some of the other numbers that are available to you. And of course, nothing is complete without evaluating and reviewing. So keep it simple. Ask your staff. You can do this in one-on-one meetings, team meetings, use staff surveys, and revisit plans regularly. It's about starting and then continually improving. So if you haven't got an organisation that's right up with this yet, just start doing something. And I've given you some resources earlier in the presentation, and you'll be able to get those after the presentation. I do have a couple of questions here. From Steve. No, didn't see that. Are there any other questions from anybody that you'd like answered? It's kind of a whistle-stop experience going through this. Normally we do it with exercises. Any questions? I did have a question, it's not on there, that I was sent about how do we re-engage with people when they come back to work. And I would just encourage you to think about going back to the purpose of work and having a shared purpose and a shared vision about why we're there, and making sure that people really understand how their work is part of that bigger purpose, so that they've got meaning in what they're doing. It's all like, almost also like team building. Again, you have to spend time building up your teams if you've been working off-site for some period of time. Steph or Catherine, have you got any questions in front of you? While I get my question sheet out. Nope, here's one. Hi, John, thanks for that. So tips for keeping your own emotions under control when you're being triggered. I guess one of the most important things is to know what is going to trigger you, so that we can think about emotions being in the middle of the sandwich and what are the things that normally trigger us, so we can see the signs beforehand. And emotions, there's nothing wrong with emotions, but it's the behaviours that we choose after them. So if something happens and we feel frustrated or angry, it's very okay to say, I feel really frustrated, I'm just going to take a walk. So the most important thing is to always be focused on what's important to you, and take action or behaviour that's in line with those values. And that might be going for a walk. It might be just saying, I can't talk about it now. You know, we have all sorts of situations when we get triggered, but there's nothing wrong with the emotion, it's the behaviour. So we have to choose behaviour in line with what's important. Hope that's helpful. Oh, interesting. Leadership commitment. How do you get leadership on board when it's currently a tick box exercise? It's a really, really good question. I think the most important thing here is you've got a couple of sticks that you can use. So the health and safety at work legislation requires businesses to take all reasonable and practical steps to reduce risk for people, and that includes health and safety. And in terms of health, it includes physical health and psychological health. So that's for an organisation that's into tick box, that's probably a starting place, is the legislation. Also, in terms of the Employment Relations Act about being a good employer, they are important. So I'd probably start from a legislative point of view, and giving them information that shows that if you look after your people, then they do a better job at the mahi and your productivity goes up. Next question, seems to be a growing tension between vaccinated people and non-vaccinated people. What's the role of leaders to keep the peace and support everyone? Any tips on how to have discussions in a workplace that build relationships between people and don't divide them? Great question. Yes, it's very true. And as I said before, it's important to know the difference between vaccine hesitance and anti-vax. And it's important in a workplace to understand that people's decisions for whatever they're doing is actually private, unless they've been given a directive to do something. But in work, we should be focusing on the bigger picture. So find out the things that you do agree on and that you can focus on, and be grateful for those and focus on those. You know, if you have in any conflict, what you always do is you go back to the things that you agree on, you find the common territory, and that's important with COVID as well. And it is unfortunate that we are seeing more division. It's important that we manage it. Does that, I'm not sure who that message was from. Terry, does that help? Focus on the bigger picture in terms of what people can agree on. Okay, I got this one. This is on my list too. I was going to answer this one. So we have 2 more sessions coming up. We have one next week, which is looking at 5 ways of wellbeing in the workplace. And then the third one is around stress. And I'll talk about burnout in that one as well. So interesting that it's the employees keeping an eye out for their managers. So as I said earlier, in terms of leadership impacts culture. So I've actually said to managers before, you seem really tired, you're working really long hours, how can we support you? So sometimes it's about asking those questions, but certainly it's better to ask the person that's impacted than talk about it with other employees. Any more questions? How can we get a copy of presentations to share? Well, this presentation has been updated, so it's currently not on the website, but it will be, and Catherine and Steph will be organising that in due course. But I would really encourage you to go and look at the website, and if I just scroll down to here, you'll see that there's all of these resources on the Mental Health Foundation website. Very, very useful resources on the Mental Health Foundation website in terms of the workplace. Lots of guides and handouts that you can use in team meetings to look at what your policies are and what does it take to have a good day, and what are we currently doing and what are we not doing, all sorts of things. There's also some specific resources in relation to COVID. So the COVID-19 Workplaces Resource, which is a multi-page document that you can download and then use for some guidance in terms of how to deal with COVID in the workplace. There's also a webinar there that Lisa Ducat did last year, which looks at how to deal with your mental health in uncertain times. There's also information on the WorkSafe website in relation to COVID and managing risk. We have a couple more questions. Yeah, so can you prefix things with "Are you okay?" That's, there's the whole "Are you okay?" campaign that's come out of Australia. Personally, I don't use it because if you said to me, "Are you okay?" I'd say yes, even if I wasn't, which is why I usually say, "How are you today?" because it means people have to stop and think a bit more. But of course, it's entirely up to you. I'm a little off today. How are you doing? Yeah, I think it's what we're trying to do is not just get a robotic response exactly. And I think sometimes too is that sometimes we have to ask more than once. And so if someone says I'm fine, then we can say I've noticed that and notice what we've talked about. We'll talk about what we've noticed, sorry. Yeah, true. How are you? Can be answered with fine. Yeah, it can be. Sometimes people don't want to tell you and they're not going to want to share, which is when you have to start talking about that. I've noticed that. Any further questions? Just wait a second, see if someone asks another one. Okay. If there's no more questions, we'll close with a karakia. Oh, we have one more, sorry. Yes, it is a whistle stop, I know. So normally we do this over 3 hours, 2 or 3 hours, and we do lots of practice sessions in it as well, which is why I'd really encourage you to go to the website and have a look at the resources there, because you can use the resources in your workplace and in your team meetings and things, but very difficult to do that online in this format. So yeah, I do appreciate it as a whistle stop. We're going to do this one in English. Restrictions are moved aside so the pathway is clear to return to everyday activities.